Welcome, everybody, to the Real Dealz podcast, one of the top real estate investing podcasts on iTunes for the last 7 years. This is the place to be for investing strategies you can actually use, expert interviews, and, of course, some good old-fashioned entertainment. Now, here's your new hosts, Elliott Smith and Cole Rudd Johnson.
What's going on, Real Dealz podcast listeners? Coming at you today with show 357. Man, long time ago when I started listening to this podcast, but we got my buddy Aaron Beal out of San Antonio, Texas today. Aaron is killing it. He's been riding this roller coaster of the ups and downs of this business. He's kind of newer in the game, but really wanted to dive into his show today where we kind of went and unpacked the sales side of this business. I feel like there's a lot missing in the information world, as you would call it. And I think Tucker always hit it spot on with his negotiating with sellers product that he sells. And, you know, I remember listening to that product back when I was working for Franz. I would listen to it while I was driving around, going to stores. I'd listen to it multiple times. And it really helped me understand how to communicate with sellers. And I feel like there's just not a lot of that out there. You know, there's a lot of things about how you get set up with a CRM, a website, you know, the marketing. Are you texting? Are you cold calling? Are you doing direct mail? MLS? What are you doing to try to find the deals? But if you're going off market, the most important part of the deal is actually sitting in living rooms and talking to sellers. And I don't feel like there's a ton of information out there, a ton of people talking about actually talking to sellers and going over phone calls, going over what your mindset is and how to deal with people at a different during your sales process. And so the other end, people always talk about what they're doing with the house. Are they flipping it? They wholesaling it? Are they burning it? You know, are they, what else are they doing with it? And they have all these things with their beautiful before and after pictures. So I'm going to take, and every week we're going to do a new segment, and it's going to be a sales training segment where I'm going to actually talk about the sales cycle, talk about sitting in the living rooms, go over phone calls, listen to phone calls, make comments on phone calls from myself, from my sales guys, from other guys that I work with that I know, and really just kind of critique them. And maybe you can listen to the calls and find a way of where they could maybe get better. And then you could take that back and go listen to your own phone calls and see where you can improve. So really excited about today's show. I think you're really going to get a lot out of it. Aaron and I really dive into sitting in the living room. What are you doing when you're walking through the house? What kind of mindset are you in? What are you trying to say to the seller? And how are you really building that relationship with the seller? And the one thing I really appreciate about Aaron is him and I both have the same philosophy on how you do this. And we really thrive on putting people first and knowing that my job is to not buy a house. My job is to go solve a problem. And if I am not the right person to solve that problem, I'm going to tell them. So maybe their house is too nice and they don't need to sell it right away. Well, I'll tell them they should list it with an agent. One of the things I've always said, and my partner have always said, is we go to an appointment to make a new friend. If we buy a house when we're there, that's great. If not, we want to be able to see you in the grocery store 6 months later and be able to shake your hand and be able to say hi, maybe give you a hug after COVID, and not feel like we have to run to the other aisle. So we're like, oh shit, this guy sees me. So really going to dive into this every week. Let me know if you guys enjoy this part of the segment. Also, go like me on Instagram at Elliott Smith REI, the Real Dealz podcast on Instagram, or you can find us on Facebook. We're going to try to get a little bit more active on there as well. So, and I also dive into a lot more calls on my Instagram page. Not selling you anything, promise. So it's just really trying to give you guys value and really pay Tucker back in a lot of ways for all the value he gave to me for the last 7 years or 6 years since we got started. So anyway, what's going on with us in our business this week? Not a ton crazy on the business side, just working a lot, having a lot of appointments with people in the call center, figuring out when the lead machine's going to turn back on. It seems like it's been a little quiet out there, and a lot of in my business and my direct mail and my cold calling, my texting, it's just been a little bit slower. Usually January, middle of January, the third week in January is usually there's a one day where it hits and the faucet turns on and we're off to the races. But it just doesn't seem like it's hit yet. So we're really working on building our systems out, making sure we have the marketing going out consistently, working on putting in, making sure marketing campaigns are set up for the entire year to be consistent. Also made an offer today on another 24 unit out here in my hometown. So pretty excited to see if that comes through. Got to make some decisions on how we're going to fund that. And maybe if we're going to bring one partner in or a couple partners. So anyway, guys, I don't have a ton more to unpack there for the intro. So let's just hop right into it and get in this week's show. And then we'll jump right into the podcast. Hope you have a great week and get after it.
All right, Real Dealz podcast listeners, I want to talk quickly about our show's sponsor, Iron Bridge Lending. If you guys have not reached out to Iron Bridge already to talk to them about funding some of your upcoming flip projects, I highly encourage you to do so. I've known the owner of Iron Bridge for a very long time. I've personally borrowed millions of dollars from them over the years to do a number of different projects, and I can say without a doubt, they are the best hard money lending company I have ever come across, and that is the reason why they are the sole sponsor of this show. I've had a lot of other companies reach out to me and want to sponsor this show, but I just won't do it. I feel like I need to be genuine in who we have sponsoring the show, and it needs to be somebody that I've personally done a ton of business with. So I personally vouch for their ability to be the best, hands down, in the world of hard money lending. You won't find better programs, you won't find better terms, and they're lending or will be lending in over 20 states. So chances are, if you're hearing this in whatever state you're in, it's definitely worth it to check out their website, reach out to them, see if they're lending in your state, and if they are, I would absolutely encourage you to do business with them. Another very cool thing to note is that they have a program for most rehabs where you can actually borrow up to 90% of the purchase price. Now, this is given the fact that you are actually buying a deal, which if you're listening to the show, that means you probably are. But if you have an actual deal on the table, they'll fund up to 90% of your purchase price, and they'll even give you rehab funds on top of that, which means that it only takes 10% down to get into a project, which is unbelievable in the hard money world. So do yourself a favor, reach out to Iron Bridge Lending, have a conversation with them, see if they're a good fit for you and for your next project. I can guarantee you that you'll be happy that you did.
Hi, this is Aaron.
Hey, Aaron. How are you?
Good. Glad I'm able to get a hold of you. How are you doing?
Yeah.
So your place on Briar Pine. Kind of what's the story there?
I've been there for maybe about 4 or 5 years.
Okay.
I mean, there's some repairs that need to be made.
Okay.
I'm just kind of ready to get out of it.
Okay. Are you leaving the area? Are you just looking for a new house, or kind of what's your
I think I'll probably go back to an apartment for a while.
Okay. So you said you've been there. Sorry, I'm just trying to pull up some info on your house. You said you've been there you've owned it like 4 years?
4 years, I think it's been.
Okay. And as far as like repairs and that sort of thing, what do you kind of know of? Looks like maybe some foundation stuff, or
there's some foundation issues. I imagine that would be the main thing.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean a few other issues that one of the toilets needs to be. I mean things that I could do. I just haven't done yet.
Okay. Yeah. So, and I guess just an overview of kind of like how we work. So generally, I'll come look at the house, kind of assess the condition and whatnot, and then, normally have you a cash offer within 24 hours. And honestly, depending on the condition, kind of how long you've owned it, there may be other options, or it may be something where I say, hey, you listing this with a real estate agent may be your best option.
Okay.
It's just kind of a thing of, honestly, like my goal is to, help you or whoever figure out, what their best options are. And if that's me, great. If it's not, that's great too.
Okay.
But yeah, so, and I guess as far as my end, next step would be, hopefully figuring out a time to, come meet you and come check out the house, and then, we can go from there.
Okay. When would be a good time for you?
Honestly, I'm pretty open now. Let me look at my schedule. When's best for you?
I'd have to check with my boss.
Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, that shouldn't be too much of an issue.
Okay. So, I mean, I could be there as early as like 3:30 or 4 today, or I have a meeting tomorrow between 2 and 3, but Wednesday, Thursday I'm open. It doesn't really matter to me.
Okay.
Whatever works best for you, and I can work around your schedule.
Okay. Well, let me check with my boss, and I'll send you a message.
Okay. Yeah, sounds good. Well, thanks for,
All right.
thanks for taking the time to call, and we'll talk soon.
Okay. Thank you. Take care.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick. Bye.
So Aaron did a lot of things right in this call. He was brief. He explained what they do, who they are. He made let the seller know that if he might not be the best fit for him, if he's not the best fit, he'll tell him if he can get more money with the realtor or if they're not in the best situation. One thing that is hard, I work on this all the time, is if he was able to take out the ands and ums as much, I think that would help the conversation. Overall, Aaron probably talked a little bit too much to this and maybe could have got a little bit more information before he went to the appointment. But what I'm guessing he was thinking was, this guy already said he wants to move back to an apartment. He's probably already had some notes on this going into it as well. So he's really just trying to get to the guy's house and set an appointment. So if you feel like you have a lead come in, the motivation's there, the guy's friendly, receptive, wants to move to an apartment, set the appointment. You're going to do a lot better in person, and you don't need to drag the phone call out forever. So great job on this first call, Aaron. Now we're going to listen to the offer, see how he does on this one.
Hello?
Hey, is this Nick?
Yes. How are you doing?
Hey, good. How about yourself? You have a minute to talk?
Good. I'm sorry?
Do you have a minute to talk? Am I catching you at all right time?
Oh, no. Now's a good time.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so man, thanks so much for having your buddy meet me out there and whatnot. I appreciate that.
Yes.
So after kind of looking at the neighborhood and some of the repairs and all that stuff, I would be for a cash offer, I'd be at 131.
Okay.
So Aaron just made the offer, and the guy says okay. So Aaron immediately feels like he's got to jump back in with more to say. So at this point, I might listen, pause a little bit longer, so you don't come off as you're trying to justify and talk them into why you're making this offer. If they ask you questions, then they're giving you permission to explain a little bit more. We always tend to want to fill dead space or jump into explaining why we're making that offer. And I think sometimes just listening and knowing that we are solving their problem and that this is a good thing for them. So this is a good offer, and I think I'm going to help you in this situation. So just being a little bit more patient in this part.
That's no commissions, no fees, and none of that kind of stuff that you would have if you sell it on the market.
Okay.
And could kind of close on your schedule, kind of as quick or as far out as you want, if that's something interesting to you.
So right here, Aaron doesn't really go into, he says, oh, there's no fees and we'll pay this a little bit and things like that, but he doesn't really expand. So if I'm making this offer, I'm going to be like, all right, so my offer is 131. That's as is, no inspections. I'm going to put large earnest money, a good amount of earnest money down, so whatever you're going to put. So I would say $5,000 non-refundable earnest money. I'll take care of all the closing costs of the title company. There'll be no inspections or no appraisals, and there's not any other fees associated. So actually it's going to be a 131 net to you. And once we sign, we'll open it up in title, and we can close in 2 weeks, or we can close in 4 weeks, whatever works best for you. Remember, we buy houses often, and you really want to make sure you're explaining to them all up front what you're going to do and what the offer really entails, because they don't know. And then after that point, you would say, does this all make sense to you, or do you have any questions? And then they can ask more questions from there.
We would still have to do a closing. What about closing costs? What?
Yeah, so I would pay all the closing costs. There'd be no repairs. I'm not going to come back and say, hey, fix X, Y, and Z. There's no title fees, all of that I would pay.
Okay.
No commissions, any of that, and whatnot. So, that number is at the end of the day, this is what you're walking away with, sort of thing.
Okay.
And that could be seriously, as normally, I try to put things at 2 weeks or a little farther out, just to anything inside that just kind of rushes the title company. But honestly, it's kind of the thing of, whatever for a timeline, as long as the title company has time to figure out title. So,
okay.
yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'm pretty sure I'll take you up on it, but do you mind if I sleep on it and get back to you tomorrow?
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is one of the best things Aaron does in this segment of calls is the guy says, I want to think about it, sleep on it. I'll probably go with you. Don't push them. This is where you really turn people off, is if you start pushing them. I know a lot of people would say, well, what do you have to think about? What's the thought process? What are you going to sleep about? Trying to get that deal going. I come from the philosophy of, if it's a good deal today, it's going to be a good deal tomorrow. And I want people to work with somebody that they want to work with. So I don't want to pressure them into a sale at this point. And I think Aaron spot on was like, absolutely, no problem. So I think this is one of the great lessons you can learn from this phone call.
And this Nick email for you?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, I'll shoot you the contract too, just to look over. It's just so you can, and I'll probably like add some notes and stuff on that too, just to explain some different stuff, just to make it, super clear that there's nothing, sketchy or shady in there.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll shoot you that, and then I'll try to follow up with you tomorrow. I kind of have a packed day, but I don't know if there's a good time to give you a call tomorrow or not.
Yeah, no. I mean, I don't really have anything planned, so I guess any time is fine.
Okay, well I'll try to I'll shoot you that now, just to have something in front of you, and then I'll hit you up like tomorrow afternoon at some point.
Okay.
Just to see if you have any questions or anything like that.
Okay. Sounds good. You too. Thank you.
Okay. See ya.
Honestly, I think this was a great call segment. I know Aaron got this deal. I think one thing you can really learn from this call, Aaron did a lot of things right, but most of all, he came off as a normal person. He wasn't a sales guy. He wasn't pressured. It's just like this guy was his friend. He's just buying a house or buying a truck or buying something from a buddy. He did a really good job there at the end when he wanted to sleep on it. And he's like, I'll send you a contract. He confirmed his email. I'll send you a contract, put some notes in there. I do this every single time. I send him over a contract. I send him over a typed email, bullet pointed, what our purchase price is, what they should expect to pay if we're splitting closing costs, how much earnest money we're going to put down, no inspections, no appraisals, all the main level high bullet points, and we can close on whatever day works for them. And I'd say I might put a hypothetical, I think you want to close in 2 weeks, so I'm putting in 2 weeks close, but it's flexible based on your timeline, Mr. Seller. So a lot of times I'll also send them a proof of funds when I am doing this as well. So really, I think you guys can learn a lot of things here from Aaron. I think he did everything really right. I think there's just a little bit to clean it up, maybe the ands and the ums, which again, I struggle with. Probably hear me on the podcast all the time. But that's one thing that you always want to work at, and listen to yourself. One other thing, I think Aaron might be able to have a little bit more time in between, transfer of the conversation when he says something that demands a response, or the guy says something. Maybe let him, if he hasn't quite finished all the way, let it go out a little bit more. Let there be a little bit more dead air. But all in all, I think you guys can learn a lot from this phone call. So wish you all the best. Get after it. What's going on, Real Dealz listeners? Got a really good show for you this week that I'm pretty excited about. We're going to mix it up and do a little bit different show this week. So officially, I'm going to be the one kind of running the show for a while. Cole's just got some stuff going on with working a ton. And so he's going to take the backseat just for a little bit. Might be back on some episodes in the future, but for right now, it's going to be me. So super excited to have Aaron here today. Aaron's a guy that uses our call center out of San Antonio, Texas. And he, in my mind, is the epitome of the first couple of years in this real estate business. And so super excited to have you, Aaron. Let's get into it. How are you doing?
Good, man. Glad you're having me on, and I can maybe redeem myself from a few weeks ago when I was the guy you referenced being emotionally unstable and all over the place. But
I know that was awesome.
No, I'm excited.
Yeah, getting that
podcast, super practical, and something I listen to every week. So, yeah, it's pretty cool. It's a nice place to go for marketing tips and hang out with people who are actually doing stuff. So it's awesome.
Cool. And also, you kind of jumped all into our universe of sorts. You got in the DFA, which I tell everybody is the best $200 a month you could ever spend. And you kind of use our call center on and off based on where you've been. We became buddies. We talked yesterday for like an hour, or Sunday for like an hour. I was laying in bed just talking. So, that's the cool thing that I'm excited about, guys, with this show in general is like, I want to bring massive value, but I want to talk to cool people and make new friends. So anyway, why don't you tell people a little bit about who you are, where you're from, what you're doing, and kind of maybe just give a 30,000 foot view of who you are, and then we can get in a little bit deeper.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm in San Antonio, Texas, as you said. To go back a little farther, so grew up in the Midwest in Ohio, went to college in Kentucky, eventually moved to Texas for a job in oil and gas. And then I did that for, I don't know, 6 or 7 years. Actually, like where you're at in Pasco and Vancouver, it's the things I remember about Vancouver are like how we're trying to build a giant terminal there. And it's like the talk of the town. But no, so I did that for, 5 or 6 years. And then just kind of didn't like it and kind of got this itch to, do the whole real estate thing, and had this idea of like, hey, if I could buy a house every now and then and it like rents and pays for itself, like that'd be pretty cool. And then I like stumbled upon like bigger pockets like everyone else in the world. And it became like oh wait, just paying the mortgage probably isn't the metric I need to go after.
Yeah.
But so it's kind of a thing of like, I jumped into that, kind of became obsessed with that. And then kind of made it a goal to quit my full-time job and, chase after that.
What were you making a year in the oil and gas? What were you doing for them?
Oh gosh. Yeah. So things I don't normally talk about. So when I started, I was making like 80, 90 grand a year.
Okay.
So I was in like health and safety. I had a master's degree, kind of had this vision of like, hey, I'm going to be a director, VP, and, be super successful and whatever. Right. But I think the thing that with me, over time, I saw people in those positions and I'm like, I still don't really want your life. Like,
yeah,
like you've still been here like 40 years doing the same thing and don't really seem to enjoy anything. Yeah. So it kind of like became a, transition to, hey, how can I do this elsewhere? And then, I quit my job way too soon. Like looking back now, especially like in COVID times, I would have thrived. I had bosses that I went like 2 years without having a local boss. I had a boss in Salt Lake. I had a boss in LA. Like I could do anything. And then I like walked away from it just like willingly.
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah. You didn't have a wife like mine that made me save like $100,000 and, make sure we had 15 months very safe. You kind of just said, oh, I like that. Screw it. Let's go.
Yeah, pretty much. I had turned my primary residence into an Airbnb and kind of like planned that and like, hey, let's see what will happen here. And then, moved in with a friend to save money, to quit my job, my, really good job that like my whole life, I was like, man, if I could ever make 6 figures, like I've made it.
I know. And I remember sitting with my buddy, we were talking to his boss at one point, we were like high school. And he's like, he makes 80 grand a year. And we're like, that's freaking so good. And, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, it was a thing too. Like my first job, I was like, I had like these big goals, like I want to make 6 figures by like 25. And then you do it and you're like, cool. Like I paid off my loans and like my car.
Yeah.
I still don't enjoy any of this. So
yeah.
Over time, that was like I just kind of like became obsessed with real estate and, what that looked like. I don't know. So I was kind of jumping all over the place, and then got my license and kind of linked up with a local investment kind of minded broker here in San Antonio, with the idea of like, I'll do the retail thing. Like that'll be fun. It's not. Yeah. And then like, I'll learn, kind of the investment and wholesaling, flipping side too. Which I did. And it was great. I made a lot of really good connections working for that brokerage. And that was, I guess, almost 2 years ago. Okay. But it was also one of those things where I'd popped off some pretty good deals with like no marketing and having no clue what I'm doing. So it was like my first deal we made like, as a company, we made like 30 grand on. Nice. And then the next one we made like 45. And then
and these are wholesale deals?
They were hotels.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, they're all hotels.
Okay.
Generally we wouldn't really assign much. We would work with a private money lender and take down pretty much everything. Which is a lot of what I do now too.
And out of that $30,000 or $45,000, how much were you getting to keep?
So the way we were set up is on the acquisition side, you made 30% of the net, and on the disposition side, you made 20. So, max of 50.
Okay.
But it didn't take too long for me getting like half of good deals to be like, I got to figure out how to do this.
Yeah, exactly.
So it was kind of one of those things where it's like, I mean, I wouldn't trade that for anything. There's the guys
you learn. Yeah.
Oh, they're awesome. And it's like, I have a title company. I have, hard money connections. I have, know how some of these things work, which was great. But it was also like, we didn't really have any consistent marketing. Like this was me like randomly trying stuff. Like I heard cold calling works. Like let's hire a VA and get a cold caller.
Yeah.
Like snagging a deal off Facebook in one of those groups, it was like just random stuff. So it was fairly successful. It was just like never knowing where that next deal was. So then kind of the end of last year, I was like, I got to figure out how to do this on my own. I got to figure out this like direct to seller thing, figure out people that are doing this successfully and, how can I replicate that? Right. How can I get like consistent deal flow? And what does that look like?
Is that where you joined in with Ryan Dossey's group at that point?
Yeah. So end of last year, I joined his group and, honestly, it was great. And I think
Ryan puts out a really good product. I mean, definitely he's absolutely. Ryan's very sharp and has done really well. We got in right at the same time. And we actually had I tell people the story sometimes, like I had met him on BP when he was still down south selling car insurance or whatever, car warranties for like 20 grand a year. And he was in BP trying to make it work and going back and forth between Indy when his wife was going to get a job or move to Indy. He wasn't just moving there randomly. It was for her military. And so it was us and this other couple that we started doing this like mastermind deal where we hopped on the phone a couple of times. And it was like this mastermind where none of us knew what the hell we were doing. So none of us knew what to talk about.
But even then, like you had someone to talk to.
Yeah. And so then I joined the DFA maybe like 3 or 6 months after that. And then I'm like, Ryan, you got to join the DFA. And so he joined the DFA. And then, but yeah, he's done really well on branding and marketing and things like that.
So I joined up his group, and I mean, for someone like trying to figure out what they're doing, never done a, direct to seller deal, like freaking amazing resources. And then it's like, I joined the DFA and that's like, another level of that too, of like a ton of people that are just like kind of doing the same stuff as you and, provide resources and ideas and all of that stuff that I'm not good at, but it's like, I'm much more likely and like willing to let someone else figure it out and just tell me what to do. And like, okay, I'll just trust that whatever you're doing with marketing works and I'll throw money at it until it doesn't, sort of thing. So joined his group and kind of started the year off slow, but then, finished 2020 I'd done 17 deals. October was great. November and December were downhill. And then, I've made and kind of linked up with you guys, at some point there.
You were buddies with Mike DeHaan, who was on here a couple of weeks ago. And we had done really well for Mike, and Mike's like, hey, you got to try these guys. And then you and I had a phone call, I think, at one point, I don't remember when. And then you're like, great, let's take the full package.
Pretty much.
Let's do everything. And cause you're like, you had all this money and you're like flush. You're like, let's invest it back in. And then all of a sudden, it just slowed down and you're still getting leads, but then all of a sudden it's like, it's not closing because the holidays, and it's like, oh man.
Oh yeah. My October was like a high. And then like November and December, I was like, this is the worst.
Yeah.
And,
I literally dropped marketing in December, and I had to call the marketing company and be like, hey, did you guys actually even drop this? Like, I don't even know if you dropped $10,000 worth of marketing for me or not.
Right. That's how I
feel like. And I'm like, this, something doesn't seem right here. Luckily, working with Open Letter Marketing, it's just, they're a good company. So they gave me a huge discount, like basically gave me like a huge discount. So I got to reorder that marketing, but it's just same kind of what we did on a lot of stuff too, I think, right? With, you were paying for texting, and we kind of put that on pause, and then I'm like, hey, I'm just going to give you credit for everything, give you an extra month, for free, and and try to make sure you're taken care of.
Yeah, and I'll jump into some of that too, because I think that may be kind of an interesting story too. So I had hired an acquisitions manager kind of in like August, September. And we got off to a really good start. But part of the thing too was like I knew bringing someone on, in order for it to work, I needed leads, right? So I needed like he needed to be able to make money, so I needed leads to like keep him busy, sort of thing. Which is part of why I jumped on with you guys, because like mail here, like I've gotten deals from it, but our response rates, they're not great. So, and then I've done really well with some of the Facebook and pay-per-click stuff, but like you can't, like, it's hard to scale. Like just because you're spending more money on pay-per-click doesn't mean you're getting more deals. It's like,
yeah.
But when that one pops up, they're like ready to go, and you're like, let's go.
Yeah.
But yeah. So from there, I mean, I kind of, you know the story, but had a really great October. My acquisitions manager we just kind of switched, like it just wasn't a good fit. We were kind of going different directions. He honestly just didn't really like it. And a lot of it was like, the fit of, like, I don't like calling and following up with people.
Did you hire him, or was he like a hire, or was he like a buddy that was doing it with you?
He was well, that's the complicated part too. So it's one of my good friends, but I hired him, so he was like working for me.
Okay.
But I mean, a lot of it was going really well, and then it's like, so that kind of like crashes down, and then you have and that was right when I was talking to you, like, hey, I need more leads. Like we need to ramp this thing up. Like,
yeah,
we're doing 70, 80 deals next year. Let's go. Right.
Yeah.
And then, so then he like kind of like quits, and quits / let him go. I don't know. It's kind of mutual.
Parted ways.
But, doesn't matter. So then I have like all these like leads stacking up, right? And I'm like, also like, what the heck do I do with these? And I have way too many projects going on, whatever. And then then I was like immediately like, whatever, I'm hiring a new guy. I hire someone like the next week. A few weeks in, he's a good guy too, just not a good fit, right? So 2 weeks in, I'm just like, man, I just don't think it's working out, right? So I let him go, and I'm just like, I think that's the day you called me, and you're like, you sound like you're having the worst day of your life. But, it was also just like, it was a time too when I was just dealing with like really like hard sellers. Like,
yeah.
I mean, because you do this, that kind of like the emotional side of it, but like it was a seller that like we sat with him at title for 4 hours trying to convince him to sign because he wanted the check simultaneously, which
doesn't happen.
Yeah. So like it was like that. And I have like this package of houses that were under rented, and I'm like raising their rent and like dealing with them all the time. So it's just like all this stuff, right?
God bless Texas, by the way, that you can raise rent right now. God bless Texas.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a whole nother story so I bought these 5 houses, and the tenants have been in there between 18 and 35 years with no rent increases.
That's awesome.
Which they were good deals.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is people forget, like, so if you're looking at like tenanted properties and it's way below market, you think, oh, great, just kick them out, raise the rents. Well, it's not that easy all the time, and then there's emotions, and you got to deal with these people that are these renters. I've freaking paid for movers and paid for things to help these renters and helped them. We've helped them on getting on, government assistance and waited. Yep. And it's just a totally different deal that people don't realize getting in there and dealing with those type of deals. All right. So we're in December. You got too many leads going. You got guys that aren't working out for one reason or another. You're dealing with hard projects and you're friggin' stressed, and you're like, and then you hadn't closed a deal for a while. So your bank account was looking a little tinier. And it's just one of those points where I don't know if anybody's, if you're watching this, you can see the roller coaster, right, of this friggin' game. I tell a story sometimes. My wife and I have had a couple times where we're like, we have freaking tons of deals that are set to close. But we're like, if these deals don't fucking close, we can't pay our credit card bill. And so like,
that was my December.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's just, you get there as a new investor. We tried not to, and you really try not to, but it's just, you'll learn over time. Like, it's never like, oh, I buy 2 houses this month and I sell 2 houses. It's either you're feast or famine. You're buying friggin', I'll be in the title company one week 5 or 6 times, and I won't be there again for a month. And it's just like, doesn't make any sense. Yep. So I swear it's the moon cycle. So, all right. So now you're back in, and now we're back to cold calling. You're kind of getting things rolling. You have somebody that's helping you out a little bit more on the phones, and then you're just going on appointments every day now.
Yeah. So, I mean, I kind of switched, directions a little bit. Right. So I talked to you, I talked to Mike, I talked to several people, and I think the direction was a lot more like, hey, like you're good with people. Like you like the people side of it. You like the meeting with people, figuring them out, like helping them. And you're like, you close deals and you like that stuff. So, I think before that I was so set on this, like take myself out of the business. Like I want a business that runs without me. Mm-hmm. But then it was kind of a thing of like, just really refocusing of like, okay, this is what I'm good at. Like, how can I free up my time to do the stuff I'm good at instead of trying to hire out the stuff I'm good at? So, I hired a guy to help me with follow-up and help me with qualifying leads and just really like hammering the phones. I mean, he makes 50 calls on a bad day, and some days, 100 plus, and just has access to my calendar and just books me with appointments. And then I go, kind of take it from there now. So I'm meeting with people, I'm doing the follow-up, making offers after. And that's finally like starting to work really well. And then kind of ended January with 5 houses under contract.
Nice.
So I feel like I'm kind of heading back in the right direction with, which a lot of the stuff with the cold calling and texting too. Like I didn't want to be quick to be like, hey, this doesn't work, because I have like 60 untouched leads.
Yeah.
So it's really a thing of like, I mean, with anything like speed to lead and follow-ups, like huge, but with those, it's like, I wasn't working them. So it's like, I can't be like, hey, Elliot, your call center sucks. Like,
no, the call center is doing its job. And now you've proven that the call center is doing its job because you got 5 deals under contract. It just takes time to get those follow-up, and you have to have somebody that's consistently following up with people. I always explain it like this is, if I call you to buy your truck, you're going to say how much. I wasn't, because you weren't thinking about selling your truck or whatever, until I build a rapport with you and find out that you actually do need to sell your truck in a month or 2 or whatever. Yep. Then we can start having that conversation. It's different than direct mail leads where people are calling you to, I want to sell, whether it's retail or wholesaler, take me off the list, right? So it's a different type of lead that you really got to incubate and go. So all right. So let's get into, as we're going to make this more of a training session. I've been spending a ton of time on the phones with people. One of my superpowers, guys, is not the organization or not any of that stuff. My superpower is the people side of this, the conversations and the appointments, and the sales side of it. As if you follow me on Instagram, you'll see a lot of my cold calling and things like that. So why don't we kind of talk through what you're doing right now, what's working, talk about your appointments, what struggles, what are you having right now in this moment, and how do we work through those and figure out the best way, and what are you doing for title? How are you managing the whole process for say? Okay. Like from lead comes in, you start the appointment to lead comes in, your guy sounds like you got this guy setting the appointments. So what are you doing? Are you showing up? What do you know when you show up to the appointment? First thing, you're going to appointment at 123 Main Street. What are you looking at? What do you know? What are you thinking about? Yeah. Well, so one, I'll backtrack, right? So I think a lot of that too is like even though like I sent you some details on a deal I did recently that I would say was one of my easiest deals, but then I was looking at it, it's like I reached out to this guy 7 times to get in front of him. You know? So I think that's a part that can be overlooked too, of like, I called this guy 3 times and texted him 4 times, but then it was really easy, right? Yeah, but you were telling me that guy that you actually had to change your number to get him to respond, right? That was a different one. Okay. But yeah, so going on appointments, I plan to have comps done before, kind of know what I can offer, and then walk through and know repairs. A lot of times I'm just hopping in the car and like reviewing notes as I pull up, sort of thing. But then a lot of that's like, a lot of what I do is trying to point people back to company website and all of that. So they're going to continuously get hit with my marketing after too. Right. So I give them, kind of like a pamphlet of like, hey, this is who we are. This is what we do.
But honestly, it's a lot like on my appointments, it's a lot more about getting to know their person and kind of like the person and what's going on than it is like, you know, walk me through the house and tell me what it's worth, which I think is one thing that like, as I've jumped more into the direct to seller stuff, like the company I worked with before, that's what we would do. I would like walk through, like say hi to the owner, be out in 5 minutes and be like 100 grand, let me know. And it's like, a lot of people still do that.
Yeah.
But there's just so much more of like a people side of it of like,
yeah,
people like at the end of the day, like I'm not really offering something any different than anyone else that's going to look at it. And unless, you know, I can't use a calculator, someone else can't.
Yeah. So there's always those different appointments, right? So you kind of need to going into an appointment, you still do need to know values, right? Mm-hmm. So how are you on understanding values? Like if I drive up to a house, I can look at any house in either Tri-Cities or Vancouver that we go to, and I can know immediately what that house is going to be worth if I fix it up. So because we stay in a certain buy box kind of area for a certain extent, but like I know because I pay attention to the market, I'm always looking at Zillow, what things are pending for, comps. Yep. And then right when I pull up when I first started, I didn't know a ton of that, but I would drive up, put the address in. I would drive up 5 minutes early, put the address in Redfin, kind of get an idea of the exterior, and then go look and see what's sold in the area, what's pending around it. And I would be able to be within 5% of what I think that thing's worth.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't do as much of that on the front end, honestly. And then the things here is like, San Antonio geographically is like a pretty big area. You know, we're 2 million people, but it's mainly because like they've annexed half of Texas. But so like, and some of that's like it, like when you're more central, it's like older houses, 30s, 40s, 50s, those drastically change street to street. And then even some of the stuff in subdivisions, which that's what I like to buy. Even those, like if you're across the street in the different subdivision, the same house might be 20, 30 grand different. So
gotcha.
I have a pretty good idea, but in my process too, I very rarely make offers on site.
Yeah, us either. We don't do it very often.
And a lot of it's kind of, you know, I'm going to walk through with them and I'm going to ask them kind of what they're looking for, like if they had a number in mind. And then a lot of times I'm kind of like anchoring that of like, hey, I'm going to do my homework. I don't know if I can get there, but like, you know, this is what I base my offer on.
Yeah.
So someone that's trying to go ahead and set those expectations of like, you want 200, you're probably not going to get it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. While you're building rapport with a person and you're not going in the first thing, shit, I ain't paying you 200 for this. You're walking through it. You're looking, when you're going through the house, so you're talking with the seller, you're walking through. First, how are you doing with COVID? Are you saying, hey, do you want me to wear a mask or how are you doing that?
It's kind of whatever people want. I'm just in the phase where I just like pull up with a mask on. But I mean, I've had people too. It's like, hey, like I had a lady throw me an N95, like you need to wear this and like
totally fine.
So I try to, you know, just be respectful of people. It's like, if they don't wear masks, I don't care. I've already had it, whatever. Yeah. But at the same time, like I just assume like I'm wearing a mask, I'll bring hand sanitizer, whatever, and then kind of adjust from there sort of thing.
I try to just be as very respectful as I can and just be like, you know, whatever you want, Mr. Seller. So we're walking through the property and how do you handle that? Are you saying, hey, they say, I'll go walk around, or you say, hey, let me, you know, why don't you leave me? And then you kind of, what are you doing there?
Yeah. So I generally walk in and kind of ask them to just give me a tour, like, you know, walk me through the house. Which part of that's intentional. Like I want to get to know them. I want to spend time with them. I mean, there's people that are just like, hey, go look, you know?
Yeah.
And you work with that, but most of them.
I usually say on that, I'd actually prefer if you came with me. You know, obviously I'm not going to steal anything, but I just want to make sure you're with me at all times while I'm walking through your house. You know, people can always, you know, say whatever they want, something they can't find something, and all of a sudden they assume that I stole it. Right. But it's also, I'm forced, and I kind of lead it to that point. I say, you know, I'd really prefer if you walk through me or walk with me in case, you know, I don't have sticky fingers, but, you know, I just want to make sure you're with me the whole time. Because and it's not so much that I'm worried about them saying that I'm going to steal something. It's I want them to know that I respect their space.
Yep.
And I want them to know, and I want them with me so I can have a conversation with them and understand it. Because I want to see how they walk. I want to see how they talk. I want to see their demeanor, because so much of conversations is all body language, right? Yep. And so I need them to go in the property with me, because if they just say, oh, just walk it, then all of a sudden it's transactional. I need to make this a relational deal. So
Yep.
I have to build that relationship with somebody that doesn't want to build it. So I'm going to force them to build it with me.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like you've probably seen this too. I have people that I'll spend like 20 or 30 minutes with, and they're like, they have their guard up the whole time. And then they just are suddenly like, hey, this is everything that's going on with the house.
Yeah.
And it's like, you could have just told me that, but it, like some of that just takes time. And so like walking through, people kind of teach different things. I don't really like beat people up on the house the whole time.
I never do either.
I know
I'll
people
point things
like,
out. I'll point and be like, hey, what's going on here?
yep.
So like if something, there's a, whatever, there's a tarp on the roof or there's like some soft spots in the shower, I'll make it very obvious that I'm checking like a soft spot around the toilet. I'll make it very obvious of what I'm looking at. And it might take a little bit longer to look at something that might have some concern, even though I don't need to look at it longer, but I might sit there and say, what's going on here?
Yeah.
But I'm not pointing out, I'll be like, well, that's, so that I'm not beating them up, because I want to be respectful again to their property. Right. One thing I've always done, and it kind of sucks pre-COVID, what I've always done to like break the ice, especially with women, because a lot of these times you are buying from, I do, it's equal to a certain extent, but I'll go in with women and I'll be like, after I've talked to them on the phone or whatever, I'll be like, I'm a hugger, and,
you're like the only person that could get away with that.
Yeah, I know, but I just say it, one thing that you guys have to understand in sales is it's how do you be funny and let people like their guard come down while asking questions or asking for things, right? So right there, it's intentional because one, I'm not really a hugger, but I want to break the ice, because that embrace and that touch, people like all of a sudden they can feel that I'm not tense, I'm relaxed. It kind of melts things away and opens the conversation up into a lot better like flow. Does that make sense? So You're releasing a lot of tension, because everybody's nervous when somebody new comes to their house. They're unsure about selling their property. Do I trust this guy? Do I not? Is he going to try to steal from me? If I come in there and I'm like, I'm a hugger, or something goofy, right? Now you can tell when people are very standoffish and it's not going to work. But most of the time you got to break that down. And I equate it to this book that I read 15 times and listened to, Pitch Anything by Oren Klaff. And it's really like people always we all have a crocodile brain. And so the first thought is, when I first meet somebody or see somebody, or they always think this is a threat. Somebody's a threat for me. So how do I break that and get that to go away, that they know I'm not a threat, that I'm actually give a shit about them? Yeah. And so, yeah. Yeah.
And I think for me, it's, the one book I kind of always have queued up is How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Yeah.
So, that's like it's a lot of, really genuinely getting to know the people and care for them. But it's also like, I leave, I'm going to know both your dog's names. I'm going to pet all your dog. It's like, they're getting a thank you letter and I'm going to like talk about their dog and thank you. All these things to, really connect with people. Because one, that's like the part that I like, but it's also like, what makes you memorable? What makes someone want to sell to you instead of, the other three people coming. But then at the end of the day, it's, like really like genuinely caring about the people in the process too, not just, hey, I'm doing this so you give me what I want, sort of thing.
How else have you found to get people to open up through your meetings? Like what do you find works really well to get, like you said a little bit ago about 20 or 30 minutes, sometimes it might take 20, 30 minutes and then they finally, someone switches. How do you try to bridge that through that conversation in that meeting and get them to open up?
I don't have specific examples, I guess, but I think it's, really taking interest in them and like the stuff they like, or like, I don't know, like I walked into the house and the guy had his whole garage converted and painted like Green Bay Packers, which I have like zero interest in, but I'm like, oh, so you're a Packers fan, and we talk about that, or, whatever.
We have a DFA member, Aaron. If you're listening to this, Aaron, sorry, Rogers couldn't get it done for you last weekend.
Ouch. But no, for me, I don't know. There's like a specific way. It's more just, taking interest in them and their families and what their hobbies are and some of that. And most people like when you talk about them, like they like to talk about themselves. They like when you compliment them. Like,
so what I always try to do is I've always done this since I was a kid. So I was very fortunate. I had a dad that took me on, he was a physician, but he would take me on adult trips. So I always had to figure out, like, in order to get in the conversation, I had to understand what they were talking about first. Right. So I try to be very well-rounded where like I'll watch CNN, I'll watch Fox News, I'll watch these things and kind of get an idea of what's going on in the world, which side's thinking what or whatever. And then I'll also like sports. Like I'm not a huge football fan, but I'll pay attention enough to sports or basketball or certain things. And so I always try to gravitate towards what they have in their house that is important to them. Like you said, the Green Bay Packers, or if they have grandkids or they have kids, like I automatically, there's a book of Monty here, for his first year, but like I'll bring out pictures of my kid, Monty. I'll bring out pictures of my wife. They love their dogs. I'll be like, this is my dog, Ted. Show them a video of Ted and really try to show them that I'm a normal person just like you. And that's really kind of how I try to do that. And then, I'll be personal. I'll talk about struggles that I've had in my life with my marriage, my depression, my anxiety, some of the things with my sister, and try to really bridge that gap that I'm just the same as you. There's no difference at the end of the day. And I found that, like you said, building that, letting them talk about themselves, but also on top of that, you want to be able to, like, if you can relate to them a little bit in whatever they're talking about and be on, then people really like you, because then they're like, oh, this guy gets me. And then they want to talk more because they think like you're one of them, right? In a certain sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I guess the one thing that I kind of forgot, it's really big for me is the dog thing. So my company is named after my dog that passed away, Murphy, right? So my logo is a dog. Like one of the houses I contracted last week, the lady walked in, she's like, I'm selling to you because of your dog. And I'm like, it's really weird, but like probably not the best basis to make a decision, but like, let's go.
I literally had a seller that sold us, and this was 3 or 4 years ago. We did a marketing postcard with Ted, our dog, Ted. He's a Yorkie. And the lady made me bring him to the appointment. And she's like, I'll sell you this house, but you have to bring Ted back to when I signed the contract and stuff. But it was only because of Ted. And I'm like, this is freaking, people are weird. Like sometimes it's like, yeah.
Yes. So now I have a Bernese Mountain Dog, Kevin. And I have the lady now that one of the first houses I ever bought, she still calls me and she's just like, how's Kevin? And I'm like, what in the world?
Yeah.
But like, that's like,
I don't want to gloss over that really quick. Hold on. I want to say something really important, guys. The lady he bought a house from still calls him to talk about Kevin. I am friends with a good number of people that I bought houses from on my Facebook. And what I can really gather, if you guys can really unpack this, is we are building relationships with people. And so we are getting them we are investing time into them, and they are investing time into us. That is not transactional. So many people look at this as a transactional business. The reason why I will always win, the reason Aaron will always win against most people, it's not about the most amount of money. It's about who they know, like, and trust, and who they feel like they have a connection or a bond with.
Yeah. I think you nailed it with that. I mean, because often, like, if you're running your numbers right, your numbers are going to be the same as whoever else's, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you may get a wholesaler that just contracts stuff at whatever people ask, but you can't fix that.
You know how I beat that? You know how I beat wholesalers that contracted at random ass numbers?
I mean, I would tell them to ask for a proof of funds, earnest money. How
much earnest money though? How much earnest money do you put down?
Generally like $500, $1,000.
I put down 10,000 non-refundable, no inspections at signing, and if I really am competing against guys that I know I'm going to buy it, I'll tell them no assignments in there either, and I'll send them a proof of funds.
Yeah,
I beat out a ton of wholesalers that way. 99% of the time, 95% of the time, I actually never put the money in escrow anyway. We're going to close on it, but like the seller never asked, so it's like I'm not really taking the 10 grand out. And at the end of the day, I would pay it if I walked away for whatever reason.
Yep.
But we don't contract things that we wouldn't buy ourselves, right? And
that's kind of where I'm at too.
Yeah. So it's
I've assigned stuff here and there, but 90-95% of what I do, I'm gonna take down and clean it out and list it or flip it or whatever. So I'm not really contracting anything I don't plan to buy. So
yeah, it's kind of how we unpack that though, is because we do want to assign some things or whatever. We'll put it in my partner's name versus my name. And so what we do on that is, like, if I'm talking to a new wholesaler, you're going out and you're doing what I've told you for the last multiple episodes. And it's, go drive for dollars, get 1,000 to 3,000 addresses and just start cold calling them. Just go find 1 or 2 buyers in your area. That's all you need. If you're in San Antonio, find Aaron, find 1 or 2 buyers. And that's what I did. You don't need this huge buyers list when you're first getting started. Then at that point, you can send them the deals before you get them under contract. Something that's trustworthy, obviously. And then at the point you can't assign it, but you can say, this is my partner. They're putting the earnest money down, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 earnest money down, and they're going to pay you an assignment fee at that time. But you're just going out and you're not really wholesaling at that point, but you're just getting paid out of your partnership on the front end. And so it's just a cleaner way to do those things to really learn. And then that's another way where you really learn this business. And like, because how did you learn how to do repairs or what costs what? I mean, it's your freaking Hard Knocks probably, right?
Yeah. I mean, you learn that stuff because you do it.
Yeah.
You know, you've paid for floors enough, or you've paid for whatever.
Yeah.
But with that too, I mean, I still do that. Like there was a little beater house that I bought and I was like, I don't want this. I don't really know what it's worth. I reach out to a guy who, bought some houses from me, like, hey, what did you pay for it?
Yeah.
And it was like 35 or 37. I was like, cool, I'll go lock it up at 30.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's completely safe too, right? Like I know
he's going to close because he doesn't want to screw me because he doesn't want to lose the deals. Except the one guy I did this with started screwing me we started partnering on some stuff. He started screwing me. So he lost all that, but the guy's not going to screw you 9 out of 10 times, especially if they're a real buyer. They don't want to go find their own deals. They need you. Hey, I'll pay this. I do that too. I just did that the other day. We wholesale a couple deals. I said to my buddies, here's the address, here's the pictures, here's everything. I actually add them on my CRM. What would you pay for this? They can see the notes of what we're getting it for. All right, guys, they'll pay 140. We got to get it for less than 140. Let me know.
Which I think that's hard because I think everyone wants to like, hey, I did this on my own, or I don't want to like split anything or any of that. And it's like, you can just freaking figure out someone to buy it, do 2 or 3 of those and you're going to learn, like
exactly.
Cause like walking, like, yeah, there's times when, like whatever you're offering, it's a deal, but even stuff today I buy and like I walked through a house. I threw it up on my Instagram that I closed on. I leased it back for 3 months, just walked through it this week. And I was just like, well, what in the world did I buy? Yeah. And that's still how I feel every time, even though I know it's a deal. So I think like, which is like crazy, you just feel so crazy. Yeah. But like, that's even more so if like you're out there trying to get your first or your second or whatever deal, to have someone to say, hey, I'll actually pay this for it. And this is why. Yeah. Even if you're going to make less, who cares?
Yeah. And really you're not at the end of the day. Like they're telling you what they pay for it. You're not telling them what you got it for. Go get it for less. I mean, now all of a sudden they say they pay 100. Well, if you can only get it for 95, then you only make 5. But if you can get it for 75, you make 25. Exactly. You know what I mean? And so the other thing I would do is when I first started going through houses and one of the guys was kind of, saying, oh, I couldn't do this or can't do this or whatever. I hired an inspector and I pay him $200 an inspection, not to write up an inspection. He just walked through the properties with me and point out things like, hey, this is going to be issues here. This might be an issue here. That's not really that big of a deal, blah, blah, blah. So then I started getting an idea of what was wrong. And so then I started learning that way. Yep. But anyway, so let's go into dive into negotiating a little bit and let's say you've walked through a house, you feel like you've built good rapport, you're calling the seller, but they don't answer you. So let's talk about that kind of stuff. I mean, that happens sometimes when people, ghost you or you can't get a hold of them. Are you getting it very much that, or what are your thought process there?
Yeah. So it kind of depends. So my process is I'm going to call to make an offer. I'll normally call and then I'll shoot them a text message like, hey, I want to talk this over with you. I'm never going to text them an offer, email them an offer. It's always a conversation. Yep. But I had a guy last week that I made an offer. We had a verbal agreement, doesn't want anything to do with me since then, which is so freaking weird. But so stuff like that, like I'll go in my CRM, I'll switch numbers, I'll call from this number. And it's like crazy how like, guy ignores me 2 calls in a row, changed the number and he's like, hello. I'm like, come on, man.
Yeah.
Like, know who this is.
Yeah. But, so it's like you're stalker. You're like a stalker at this point, right? Now we're stalking ex-girlfriends.
Yeah. Right. But like, so like initial calls, like if I'm trying to get someone on the phone, I'll dial them. I won't immediately leave a voicemail. I'll hang up, immediately dial them again. Mm-hmm. Doesn't always work, but a lot of times if you dial them back to back, they pick up the second time or it bypasses their do not
They might not recognize the number when you're calling. They probably haven't saved your numbers. They might not recognize it. So I'm not going to answer this. And then the problem with leaving the voicemail is, like me, I'm busy. I don't listen to voicemails that often. I'm like, I don't recognize that number. I see a voicemail, might forget about it, whatever. It's no big deal, right?
But also, if you see that someone called you twice and left you a voicemail, you're probably like, what's that?
Yeah. Shit, is this my doctor? Am I pregnant?
Exactly. But yes, I mean, that's kind of, what I do to get people back on the phone. And then, I mean, eventually it goes to a point of like, if you're ignoring me, I'm putting you on a automated text sequence and get my VA on the line to call you once a week until we get you back on the phone or like you disappear. Right. And that's one thing that is super important too, is just the continuous follow-up. Like some of these leads take years, months, forever.
Totally.
And they just like come out of nowhere, right?
Yeah. I just bought a duplex last April, and I had been talking to this lady since like 2016. And like I had called her, I made her an offer back in 2016 at like 150 or something like that, and she didn't want to do it then. I followed up with their yearly. I would always go back to my old emails. That's why I'm stuck at deleting emails. And I'd be like, oh shit, I forgot to follow up with her. Send her an email, see how she's doing. And then just randomly she texted me, emailed me last January, and she's like, hey, I'm ready to go. And I'm like, okay. And we go in there and, negotiate the deal. And it was the easiest deal ever because I had built that long-term follow-up. She just wasn't ready. But then when she was ready, she's like, this guy's consistent. He's still here. I know, like, and trust him. I'm going with him. I trust who this guy is.
And then like 4 years later, she probably jumped in and like acted like she'd never missed a beat, right?
Yeah. Like, yeah.
It's probably just like, oh, I haven't been ignoring your calls. Like,
yeah. And it wasn't even that we were calling her all the time, because I'm not a relentless follow-up or like that sometimes. Like, I want people to like, it's a hard balance that I have, is because I want people to know, like, I want them to like me. And so like, I don't want to blow them up. If they're not ready to go right now, that's fine. There's no big deal. I just want to get a hold of you so you can tell me you're not ready to go. And then I just, every 6 months, we try to follow up with them or whatever, 3, 4, 5 months. It always pisses me off when they're not ready to go. And then all of a sudden I see it like sold like 2 months later though. I'm like,
well, that's my thing, where I'm probably a little more aggressive on that, of like, I don't want to like drive people crazy, but I want to like toe that line of like, if you're ever thinking like, I'm going to sell my house for cash, these are the people that come to mind.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It's like, that's kind of where I want to be, of like, you're not quite really annoying me, but you're close,
Yeah. And that's really where we should be, is, up until last year, it was just so easy. We could drop 10,000 letters, go buy 2 or 3 houses. No big deal. We do 25 a year, and it was just easy. So I didn't need to do the long-term follow-up and all this stuff. Now it's, again, I'll be talking about this a lot, guys, as this business is growing up from a hobby business into a more of a business type of business, that you're really going to have to put systems and different marketing channels. You're going to have to do the cold calling, the texting, the direct mail, the sniper marketing, maybe some PPC, maybe Facebook, but you're going to have to build up into that and actually build a business. Now, it doesn't need to be huge. You just need a good leads manager and a sales guy and a good dispo process, but the marketing's got to stay consistent, and you got to keep your follow-up consistent.
Absolutely.
So let's say, okay, so you make an offer to a seller, you're talking to them, and they say it's too low.
Okay. Yeah. So,
and let's unpack that a little bit, because you said you always try to feel out where they're at, kind of their prices. So let's say a seller's at 100 when you're doing your walkthrough, and you make an offer at 65. Let's just say, and they say that's too low. Are you saying straight out, I'd be at 65, or are you saying I need to be somewhere around 60 to 70? Are you saying how do you unpack that?
Yeah. So I'll give them the actual numbers. So in that case, I would say, I kind of like break it down of like, hey, we looked at kind of what's going on in the neighborhood, some of the stuff that might need to be, repaired or updated with your house. And then I'll remind them, like, you're not going to have any fees. You're not going to pay title. You're not going to pay, realtor fees. Kind of take all that into consideration, but, I'll be at 65,000. And then I just freaking shut up. Right. Yeah.
But say they're at 100 and you take off realtor fees and all that stuff, at worst, your repairs, you're maybe $6-7 grand on fees, right? Realtor fees and all that. So you're down to 3, and then maybe say it needs 15 grand worth of work. So down, you're down to, so let's that 78. Now you're still $13,000 apart, which is 13% apart, right? So, but then you say that, and then you just shut up and let them talk.
So 13 grand apart's like amazing. But anyway,
it is, but sometimes that's a big
Yeah.
deal. Some people, I mean, that's still 13%. So, I mean,
yeah, for
I'm
sure.
trying to make your numbers based on kind of where you're at.
No, absolutely. So I would hit them with the 65 and then I just go quiet. Like let them,
Now, are you willing to come up from say the 65? Are you willing to come up, or are you throwing a lower offer out knowing that you have room to come up, or are you putting your highest and best out there?
No, so I mean, I build in, it depends. I'm not going to give my highest best right away unless it's kind of depends on the marketing channel. Like if it's pay-per-click and I know I have competition, I'm building in like 4 to 5 grand that I can go up.
Okay.
If it's something that I'm willing to like take my time with, there's probably like 10 to 15 in there.
Okay.
So like that, I mean, generally they're going to be quiet. They're either going to be like, that's too low, hang up, or they're going to like just not say anything. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when, they'll say, oh, it's too low. And I normally hit them with okay, well, it sounds like you have something in mind. Like, what were you thinking? What might work for you? And then they normally come back, wherever. And it's rare that that's going to be locked up on the phone. That's normally going to take several calls later for me I'm going to work you down 10 and I'm going to go up a few grand sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But some of that too, I mean, it depends on like why they want to sell it, but like some of the stuff with listing it on the market too, like I personally have had so many things I've listed that have fallen through like the week of closing lately with like weird stuff with COVID and like,
yeah, we had a guy lose his job the day before closing on a deal that friggin' was, yeah.
I've like had more of those than I can count. So I'll like hit on some of that too.
Now, but are you talking a lot, or are you trying to be quiet and let them talk themselves into this, because they have to process it, right? In their brain.
So I'm generally just trying to listen as much as I can and, kind of let them do the talking. Cause once you kind of like, play your piece, they're going to come back with something.
Yeah.
It's either a like, absolutely not, or it's a like, okay, well, let's think about it. Or like, let's figure out how we can.
For me, I don't normally make offers if it's going to be an absolutely not, in my opinion. So if I kind of already got to the appointment, I've already gauged where the seller is at. And I know, and you'll learn this, guys, over time, but you kind of know say this same seller, right, is at 150 when you went and walked their house, right? And you need to be at 65. I'm never going to make that offer at 65. What I'm going to say is Mr. Seller, I just don't think I can get to your price expectations. I went and crunched the numbers as hard as I can. I don't even think I can get close. And I just really don't want to waste your time or my time, because I just don't think we're going to be able to bridge the gap. And then I'm giving them a fear of loss. And then they either do one of two things. They either say, okay, thanks for your time. Or they say, well, I do have room. Well, where could you really be, Mr. Seller?
Yeah.
Another thing that I will use, and that works really well when I think they're too far off, because really, guys, in this type of market, in any market, actually, these things matter, and you don't want to waste your time on deals that aren't going to be a deal, right? So, either kill it, and you're trying to kill it with them, have them kill it for you, because then they're making that decision, right? I'm not putting it out there. If I tell them 65, then they're like, oh, fuck this guy, that's a ridiculous offer. But if I just say, hey, I can't get to where you're at, I haven't killed myself. I still have everything in my chest, all my cards in my chest. I haven't killed it. I haven't lost the rapport. I haven't lost the relationship because I didn't offend them. Right. And so I really try to do that. Another thing I do that works really well.
Jump in real quick?
Yeah, go for it.
So I'll sometimes do that too, kind of soft pass, but, and I guess my approach too is a little different, where I'll say, hey, I can make you an offer. I don't think it's going to be what you want. I don't want to offend you, but I can't, so it's kind of saying like, I can give you a cash offer, but you're gonna have to like ask me for it.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of the same, like,
yeah, very same line as you're giving them permission to say, hey, I don't want to offend you. This is going to offend you, instead of just coming out and saying, because, hey, Mr. Still, I care about you as a person and your feelings. And I just don't really want to offend you. So, I mean, I'll give it to you if you really want it, but I just don't think we can get there. And usually if I have to do that, and I've done that plenty as well. And I think both those tactics work hand in hand, are very similar. You might say one way the one day and one way the other day. Right. But you're trying, it goes back to that pitch anything, is you're trying to take control, So at that point, they're giving you permission to offend them, right? When you ask them that question, that's a great way to ask it. So once they give you permission, then all of a sudden they can't get mad because they asked for it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they're giving you permission for that. And then, but one thing too, like if it's an appointment, especially if it's someone that's like reached out to me or I see some underlying motivation, like I'm not killing it. Cause I've had deals where, you know, their asking price, and I'll talk about it later on, and the real deal was like 260. And, you know, I talk them down significantly over time
I've done it too.
Because there's still that motivation, right? Like
correct.
If I see that, I'm not going to like let it go. If it's like, but if it's a cold caller that I called you out of the blue and you said, I'll sell it if you give me what I want.
Yeah.
Like
different. Yeah.
It just kind of depends.
And great point. And I kind of glossed over that too. I set appointments on one or two ways, because the price is right or the motivation's there. Right. So if the motivation's there, I don't care what their freaking price is. And so at that point, because I know the motivation's there, so I'm not going to kill that deal because I know the motivation's there, but I'm still not going to give them a price. I'm going to make them kind of get it out of me, and I'm going to make them come down. And I'm going to be like, and then what I've done before as well, and I'll play this in maybe in a couple of weeks. I got this great call that does this. I got a similar deal. I got this guy from 320 in 24 hours down to 220. And so it's what I do is I say, you know, I have a partner, right? And even in Tri-Cities, I say I have a partner, which is my wife, but you know, I make all the decisions on that. So what I'll do is I'll be like, when seller gives me an offer, I'll be like, I just don't know if I can do that, Mr. Seller. Let me talk to my partner, Corey, or my partner, and see where we're at, and just like double check with him. Cause I don't think we were going to be there. And then I call him back later. I let him stew for a while. Right. And then, but I always play, I'm the good cop always. And I'm the guy. And then I have a partner out here that's the bad cop.
Well, that's like when I had an acquisitions manager, that's what like I told him all the time. I was like, make me the bad guy as much as you want. Just be like, my boss won't let me do that. Or like, because that's like an easy one to play where it's a little different when you're the only person. And it's like, but it's still like, hey, let me look at it some more. Let me, you know, see what we can do. And then, you know, you create some of that separation between those calls that, you know, it's a lot easier to like talk someone down a little bit with a day in between than like, you know, immediately going up 10 grand or like immediately
because everybody has fear of loss, right? You've already, if they're in their brain have said, I need Aaron, I need his program, I need to sell my house fast, don't want to fix this house, I don't want to do all these things. And you say, hey, I just don't know, let me talk about it, I don't know if I can get there. Then they're like, oh shit, I can go down because I need this guy to friggin' buy it. They're just trying to shoot for the moon, right?
Yep.
So I really think that's really important is people always get in such a hurry. Like they're just, here's the number, Mr. Seller, or lock it up on the spot. I have a saying that if it's a good deal today, it's going to be a good deal tomorrow. And that's for the seller and myself. And I tell the sellers all the time, because I don't take a contract there, say we're talking about price, but I say, great, I'll send you a contract later. You can take the time, look over it, think about it. I'm in no hurry. You sign it when you want. Because then they're like, if I'm pressuring, I don't like that pressure stuff. Like, then all of a sudden they're like, oh shit. Then they have the fear of loss the opposite way. Like, I shouldn't have sold to this guy. But when they actually finally do sign it and commit, they're like, they're committed. They've thought about it. They know this is what they want to do, you know?
Yeah. And honestly, my approach with that varies from seller to seller. There's some where it's like, if I don't give you a deadline, you're never going to do anything.
Correct.
But then there's also like if I have competition, I'm like, cool, I'm sending you a contract. Like, I'm taking it back in 6 hours, you know, like, so, I mean, it just kind of depends on the situation and the people and stuff. But a lot of them, it's like, and I've had several sellers like, man, I just like that you're like low pressure. Like, I don't feel like I'm being like sold into something. And it's like, cool, I'm going to call you every month because you asked me to, but like, it's never going to be like, today's the only day, you know?
Yeah. I had one of our best flips last year where I showed up after the gym and gym closed. And it was like, I went there and she's like, oh, I thought you'd be wearing a suit or something. You're not what I expected. And I'm like, I'm just a normal freaking guy, just like you.
Right.
You know what I mean? There's nothing different about me versus you. I'm just buying the house, you know? And so, you know, that immediately builds rapport with these people. You know, obviously I try to wear, you know, but I also do, I don't know about if you do this, Aaron, I'll dress to the person I'm going on the appointment with to a certain extent. If this is an older person that maybe is very respectful, I can tell that they maybe want a little bit more professionalism. I'm going to show up in jeans and a collared shirt and maybe have my hair done or wear a hat, whatever. Whereas if it's, another seller that, they don't really care. They're like, hey, my house is messy or whatever. I mean, that would be the older guy would maybe be like a landlord, something like that, where they're still more professional in that sense. They're just tired of these freaking tenants. I'm going to show up and be a little bit more professional. If they're living there and they're like, my house is a mess or they're hoarder, I'm just going to wear shorts and a t-shirt, and just be normal Elliot. Both one are normal Elliot, but you're telling them a story. And that's really what you guys have to understand is you're telling them a story and you're merging your two stories and they're going to tell you their story and you're finding a way where your stories can connect and actually work well together and how you guys can be a good team moving forward. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I don't really change that up much. I mean, I have branded t-shirts, branded polos, and kind of make sure I'm wearing something branded. And that's like,
and you can never go wrong with that, guys. I mean, you can never go wrong with a branded t-shirt or a polo or whatever, and shorts or jeans.
Yep. And my thing is like, I want them to see like, hey, this is legitimate. This is like, these are the people that I saw online. This is the same name. This is,
See, that's where we vary a little bit is we don't give a credibility packet. We probably should. We talked about doing it for years. I'll send credibility stuff to their emails once they get their email and things like that. But we just go as we're the local guys that you would call up, and we know in Tri-Cities, I know freaking so many people that I always have a connection, 1 or 2 distance connection with these people. It's probably harder in San Antonio with 2.2 million people. So we always try to be that local. And I think there is, if I was in a big city like a Seattle, I would probably be more branded and wear those things. But in the local smaller areas, you can be a little bit more relaxed in some ways, I would think.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, all right. So I think I think we had a lot of similarities on how we do this. How many offers out of how many appointments that you go to? What's your kind of close ratio?
Oh man, I should know the answer to that, and I don't.
That's fine.
So on pay-per-click stuff or like more like internet based, like motivated, I'm probably at like 1 out of 2, 1 out of 3 sort of thing.
Okay.
On the cold call stuff, it's probably less than that.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't know, 1 out of 10. I mean, so last January, I ran, 30 some appointments and got 5 contracts from that. So
that's good.
Yeah. Somewhere in the like,
are you being
I hope at least 1 out of 10 sort of thing, but
are you being a little bit more liberal on the appointments you're setting though? Are you going on appointments that, are you like, maybe like, I don't think I'm going to be able to buy this house, but I'm still going to go on the appointment and see what happens.
Yeah. I am. Honestly, my approach is more like if someone's willing to like take an appointment with me and talk and they're not like asking for something like, even if they're asking retail, I'm fine with that.
Totally.
If they're asking like $100,000 over retail on a like $100,000 house, I'm just like, no, thanks.
Yeah.
Cool. I mean, I'll go look at anything. Like I looked at like a house here last week that was like $1 million house, which is like crazy expensive over here. Maybe
you
not
buy it for Kevin.
Market. What?
You buy it for your dog? What was your dog, Kevin?
Kevin?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, it's kind of crazy. There's like a house like in the city on 2.5 acres. Like,
yeah.
But like I'll get people too. Like, you probably don't want to look at my house, do you? And I'm like, yeah, sure. Like,
we'll look at any house. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll buy anything. Like,
yeah.
Doesn't matter. Like, we'll figure it out if it makes sense, So
yeah.
I go from sometimes it's a $30,000 house or whatever to $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 house. It just all depends.
Yeah. All right, cool. Well, let's go. I think that's really a good segment right there to end and go into our segment called the Real Dealz segment. So why don't you got a deal that we've talked about this, and it's really a deal. It's not trying to be your most amount of money. It's a deal that you feel like everything went really, it worked out really well, but you learned a lot from it. And it was just a good deal that can encompass like what this business is like.
Yeah, for sure. So, this was a house I bought last June. And I guess to give a little more background on area. So it's kind of this cool, like mid-century house that's been not updated, but like really well kept. Like, it was designed by this like local San Antonio architect who's like done stuff on the Riverwalk, kind of well known, whatever. But it's like pink floors, green cabinets, like, or, that kind of stuff in the bathrooms. And, but just really cool house. So they came in from a Google lead. I talked to the guy forever. This was right when a bunch of the COVID stuff was kind of like, spiking and whatnot. And and they were really, really cautious about having anyone in the house. So they wanted to sell. His wife was immunocompromised. They didn't want anyone in the house. They wanted 260 or something for the house. ARV was probably like low 300s. I was at like, my initial offer is 165, but that took forever to get there. But so I talked to this guy for like 20 minutes, and he just like, we connect really well over the phone. He won't let me come see the house because, his wife, right?
Yeah.
So I talked to him, and I was like, let me do this. Let me drive by. Let me send me some pictures. I can make you an offer without seeing it. And then if we agree, we'll figure out a way, just I'll walk through it once. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I call him back, and I don't even make him an offer. I just kind of soft pass it. Right. So I'm like, hey, I know you want 260 or 270, whatever. And I was at 165. So I pretty much told him hey, I'm not going to make you an offer, but here's some options that may be better for you. Which first I think I told him to list it, which I really like telling people to list their houses.
I tell them all the time, go list it.
Yeah, for sure. And some of that's hey, if you're willing to wait it out, it's best for you. But it's also people let their guard down and then start selling you on why you should buy it.
Yeah.
But so this guy, they're in this weird scenario. I actually reached out to some of the iBuyers to see because that was right when all of the iBuyers shut down. So I was getting calls on oh, Open Door is going to buy my house, and they pulled the plug, whatever. So it was one of those where I'm your house is in good shape. If you're not going to list it, they're going to overpay for it. I'm not, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So then I called some of those for him. They weren't buying. I had some friends that were looking for a house, and I was just going to try to connect them on hey, you can get a little better deal.
So what you're doing right now is you're talking about, you actually give a shit about a seller. You connected well. You're trying to do what's best for him.
Oh, absolutely. I was literally hey, I'm not your best option, but I'm going to try to help you out. Right.
Yeah.
And then it went months, and I didn't ever expect to hear from these people again. And then he calls me back, and he's we found a house we want to buy, and we need to sell this one. So it's so it was a thing where they decided they wanted to sell and needed to pretty much wire funds from one house to the other. Right.
Yeah.
And then, so then he's I was just dude, I can't pay you 265. And then he, eventually was okay, what about 185? And I was whoa, we're kind of good. We're kind of close now. So then, I was just no, I can't pay that. I'm at 165. So eventually he's okay, well, I'm going to let you come see the house.
Have you told them your offer at this point? Your 165?
Yeah. At that point he had asked me, I had told him hey, I'm not going to make you an offer. And he's well, what would it be?
Yeah.
So I tell him, and he's oh, that's way too low. Right.
Yeah.
So then, a few months later, he hits me at 180, and that's when I'm or 185. And I'm no, it's still too high. Can't do it. And also this house was in a weird neighborhood where it was the smallest house in the neighborhood sort of thing. There weren't comps, but I felt it was worth, 250 or whatever as is, but there was nothing to prove that. It was also a neighborhood that right by our medical center, so that you see tons of cash sales by doctors.
Yeah.
But so it's all these weird quirks that aren't normal. But it's you can't quantify it.
Yeah.
Which some of those have been my best deals of hey, I think there's something here, but I can't point to the facts on it. But anyway, so they eventually came back, and they're okay, I think we're close. You can walk through it. We'll do 165. Right. So I have a contractor. I'm wiping down everything I touch as I go through, and all, everything with COVID. And then, so I eventually came back to the guy and was hey, I'll actually give you 170. It's it's nicer than I thought. So we had a deal at 170. I had just bought 2 other deals, didn't really want this house, tried to assign it to someone for 185, a buddy for 185. He's like, no, it doesn't work. So then my private money lender, we decided to partner on it, which at the time I was a little bitter about, because I was like, you're taking a pretty big split for this. But it ended up like, I think I gave him 60%. I took 40. But it was like, whatever, I got to close this thing. And the guy's like it was lined up where it's like, we're wiring money from one title company to the other.
Yeah.
So my buyer was kind of like, I'm out. I had 2 buyers that were like, oh yeah, we wanted it 185, don't want it. So I'm like, okay, we got to close this thing. Like, I think we can sell it for 250. I don't really know. Like, comps probably say 230. So we end up taking it down. We switched the light bulbs and did a drywall repair, listed it at 249, had multiple offers.
Nice.
And we were in it for 170.
Yeah, that's amazing.
But the cool thing too is like, now I look back at it and I was like, man, I should have gotten a bigger split, but I still made more than if I would have assigned it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And that's the thing, guys, don't get greedy, in this deal. You got to make a deal happen. I've given a lot away in a lot of deals where I'm like, man, I should have made more, but then it always comes back on the back end. Now that guy's going to trust you. He's going to give you money. You one phone call, you'd be like, hey, I can't do that deal anymore, but I got a deal. I'll give you 25% equity in this deal if you can fund it or whatever. And you start working them down and building those relationships. So
yeah, but no, so that was cool. Cause like it sold like, and then we had multiple offers, like, so I think we sold it at 240, 247. We
Nice.
took $2,000 off after the inspection.
Nice.
And I think I netted 20, 25, something like that.
It's a perfect deal.
But then the cool part too is like, I had like in my mind, so then this happened probably months later. I get a call from a random guy who those sellers referred me to. And I just kind of assumed they hated me. Like, you saw that I just bought your house and sold it as is for significantly more.
You thought he was calling you for that?
No. So I just like assumed that like they saw that I sold it for a lot more, didn't do anything to it and hate me. Right.
Yeah.
But so then I get a referral of someone he works with who I'm still talking to now, who called me out of the blue and it's like, hey, this guy like said, if I'm selling my house as is, like, you're the guy, like, you're trustworthy. You like did what you said you're going to do.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. Cause in my mind, I was like, they think I took advantage of them. They think I'm like a jerk.
I worry about that all the time. We never wholesale because like, I would feel so guilty. Like if they were to know like what I sold these things for with like doing no effort, but like, you also have to remember, and we're going to wrap this up here, but you got to remember that people will trade equity for ease of transaction. And if you built proper rapport and relationship with these people, they want you to win. They want me to win. They're invested in me because they see my son. They've seen pictures of my dog, my wife, my family. They know they want me to win. They want to win too. And they know that I want them to win and be happy. So I'm just solving a problem. They're fine with me winning to solve their problem.
And part of that too is like when you're buying their houses as is, or meeting their specific conditions of like, close this day so I can buy this day, like you're really providing something of value. And I think that's part of the going on appointments and stuff too, is you got to believe that what you're doing is like actually adding value. You're not just like, trying to get huge deals on everything. It's like, if you go into it like, hey, I'm really offering you something that's like worth something.
Yeah.
That approach is a lot different than, hey, I'm just trying to make money. This is a job. Like,
exactly. Yeah.
I saw on Instagram, you can get rich from this. Come on.
Exactly. So awesome, Aaron. Well, we'll have to have you back in this summer, see how everything is going after you've been running this a little bit more, seeing if you're on an upswing or a downswing. But man, I really appreciate you coming on the show today and kind of unpacking it, what you're doing, and having a conversation so we can help people maybe with their sales and negotiation a little bit and get going in that direction.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me, man.
All right, man. Have a great day.